Every financial planner, every retirement calculator, every glossy brochure from the investment industry will tell you the same thing. You need at least $1 million, maybe 2, maybe 3 to retire. They'll show you charts, projections, and warnings about inflation, healthcare, and longevity. They'll tell you that freedom is a luxury for the ultra-wealthy, that you'll need to grind for 40 years, that you'll need to save every penny and hope the market gods smile on you. They're not just wrong. They're wrong in a way that keeps you trapped, working decades longer than you need to, because they're asking the wrong question. They're asking, how much do you need to keep living exactly as you are, in the same place with the same habits for the rest of your life? But that's not the question that matters. The real question is, how much do you need to make work optional? To wake up every morning and decide what to do, not because you have to, but because you want to? To have enough passive income that you never have to work for someone else again, unless you choose to? That number is not 2 million. It's not 1 million. It's $300,000, and I'm going to show you why. Before you roll your eyes, before you dismiss this as fantasy, let's look at the math. Let's look at the assumptions. Let's look at the way Charlie Munger, one of the greatest investors of all time, thought about money, freedom, and the real cost of a good life. Because if you understand the arithmetic, you'll see that the path to freedom is much shorter, much simpler, and much more achievable than you've been told. First, let's talk about what retirement actually means. The retirement industry wants you to believe that retirement is about maintaining your current lifestyle forever. If you spend $80,000 a year now, you'll need to spend $80,000 a year after you stop working. That seems logical until you look at what you're actually spending money on. Most of your spending is compensation spending. It's money spent to make up for the time, stress, and inconvenience of working. You buy takeout because you don't have time to cook. You buy new clothes for work. You pay for expensive vacations because you only get 2 weeks a year. You buy a nice car because your commute is miserable. You spend on entertainment because you need to decompress from work. Stress take away the job, and most of that spending disappears. You have time to cook. You don't need work clothes. You can travel off-peak when flights and hotels are half the price. You don't commute. You're not stressed, so you don't need expensive coping mechanisms. The actual cost of a good life without employment is 30 to 50% less than the cost of the same life with employment. That's the first assumption that's wrong. The second assumption, you'll live in the same place. Why? If your job is what ties you to an expensive city, why stay there when the job ends? The difference in cost of living between New York and Lisbon is 70%. Between San Francisco and Chiang Mai, it's 85%. Between Seattle and Medellin, it's 75%. You can have a better quality of life in dozens of places around the world for a fraction of what you're spending. Now, better weather, better food, more time outdoors, stronger communities. The only reason not to consider these places is if you're anchored by employment or family. Remove those anchors, and the world opens up at prices that make freedom possible, with far less capital. The third assumption, you need to replace your income. Wrong again. You need to cover your expenses. Those are different numbers. Most people confuse income with spending because during your working years, those numbers are related. But in retirement, income is irrelevant. Only expenses matter. If you can live well on $18,000 a year, you don't need to replace a $70,000 salary. You need $18,000 a year. This is where the math gets interesting. $300,000 invested in a conservative, diversified portfolio of dividend-paying stocks and index funds targeting a 4% yield generates $12,000 a year in passive income. That's $1,000 a month. In the United States, $1,000 a month is poverty. In Portugal, it's a comfortable middle-class life. In Thailand, it's upper middle class. In Colombia, Vietnam, Albania, and dozens of other countries, it's enough to rent a nice apartment. Eat well, have health care, enjoy entertainment, and even save a little. Not survival comfort, security, freedom. Why doesn't the financial industry tell you this? Because their business model depends on managing as much of your money for as long as possible. If you knew that $300,000 could buy you freedom, you might stop working at 40 instead of 65. That's 25 fewer years of fees and commissions for them. So instead, they sell you fear. They show you calculators that assume you'll spend the same amount for 40 years. They show you healthcare cost projections that assume you'll use the expensive American system. They show you longevity tables that suggest you might live to 95 and need 50 years of funding. All of it designed to keep you saving, working, and paying fees for decades. Here's what they don't show you. Take $300,000 invested in a globally diversified portfolio of dividend stocks and low-cost index funds. Target a 4% yield through a combination of dividends and safe withdrawal. That's $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month. Now move to a location where $1,000 a month covers a comfortable life. Not luxury, not scraping by comfortable. A one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. Good food cooked at home, with occasional meals out. Local health care through the national system or affordable private insurance. Internet and phone. Modest entertainment and hobbies. Occasional travel within the region. This describes life in Portugal, Spain, Greece, Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Albania, Bulgaria, and at least 30 other countries. In many of these places, $1,000 a month isn't scraping by. It's living well by local standards. Better weather than most American cities, better food culture, more walkable cities, stronger social connections. The quality of life isn't worse than the American middle class. It's often better. The only thing you're giving up is proximity to family and friends, which matters enormously to some people and barely at all to others. If you're someone for whom geographic flexibility is possible, $300,000 is genuinely enough to never work again. Not in theory and practice. Tens of thousands of people are living this way right now. Now, let's address the obvious objections because I've heard them all. What about health care? American health care is ruinously expensive without employer coverage. But American health care is not the only option. Most developed countries have public health care systems that are free or low cost for residents. Portugal's National Health Service covers residents, including foreign retirees, for less than $50 a month. Spain's is similar. Many countries offer private health insurance for foreign residents at prices between $100 and $300 a month for comprehensive coverage. Thailand's private hospitals offer world-class care at prices that are 10 to 20% of American costs. Medical tourism is a massive industry precisely because healthcare in most of the world costs a fraction of American prices. A knee replacement that costs $40,000 in the United States costs $8,000 in Spain and $4,000 in Thailand. Same outcomes, qualified surgeons, modern facilities. The healthcare argument against geographic arbitrage retirement is based on the assumption that American healthcare is superior, which is true for cutting-edge experimental treatments and false for routine care. For routine care, dozens of countries offer equal or better outcomes at vastly lower costs. Second, what about inflation? Valid concern. A 4% withdrawal rate assumes your principal maintains its purchasing power. If you're withdrawing, $12,000 a year and inflation runs at 3%, your real withdrawal capacity declines over time. 3 solutions. First, your $300,000 remains invested in stocks, which historically appreciate ahead of inflation. If the market returns 7% and you withdraw 4%, your principal grows at 3%, roughly matching inflation. Second, most people in geographic arbitrage retirement find ways to generate modest additional income. Teaching English online, freelance consulting, small online businesses, creating content. When you're living on $12,000 a year, an extra $3,000 or $4,000 from occasional work makes a huge difference and is easy to achieve without anything resembling a traditional job. Third, lifestyle flexibility. If inflation erodes your purchasing power by 15 or 20% over a decade, you adjust. You move to a slightly cheaper neighborhood. You cook more meals at home. You travel less. The buffer between $12,000 annual spending and survival is enormous in low-cost countries. Small adjustments maintain quality of life even if purchasing power declines. Third, what about family and friends? Legitimate concern. Geographic arbitrage retirement means distance from your existing social network unless they come with you. For some people, this is impossible. Aging parents, young children, deep roots in a community. If you're genuinely tied to a location by unmovable obligations, then $300,000 probably isn't enough unless you're in a low-cost American location. But many people overestimate how tied they are. Adult children don't need you living nearby. Video calls and annual visits maintain relationships. Aging parents are a real constraint, but a temporary one. And there are ways to structure care from a distance if necessary. Friends drift apart over time regardless of location. The friends you had in your 20s aren't the friends you have in your 40s. New friendships form wherever you live. The geographic arbitrage retirement community is. I want to address one more objection, because it's the one that stops most people before they even start. I don't want to leave America. I don't want to live in a foreign country, learning a foreign language, eating foreign food, surrounded by foreign culture. I want the life I have, just without having to work for it. This is the objection that reveals whether geographic arbitrage retirement is viable for you. If you're someone who derives identity and comfort from American culture, American lifestyle, American proximity to family, American convenience, then no. $300,000 is probably not enough. You'll need more capital to fund a more expensive lifestyle. But I'd encourage you to examine whether that preference is deep and authentic or shallow and circumstantial. Many people think they couldn't possibly be happy living abroad and then spend 2 weeks in Portugal or Mexico or Thailand and realize that not only could they be happy, they might be happier. Better weather improves mood. Better food culture improves health. More walkable cities improve fitness. Slower pace improves stress. Stronger social culture improves relationships. Lower cost improves security. Many of the things that make life good are more available in lower cost countries than in American cities optimized for work and consumption. The preference for American life is often a preference for familiarity rather than a preference for superior quality. When people actually experience the alternative, a significant percentage prefer it. Not everyone. Some people genuinely are happiest in American culture and American systems, and for them, geographic arbitrage doesn't work. But many people assume they're in that category without ever testing it. I'm suggesting you test it before assuming your only path to retirement is accumulating $2 million. Here's an experiment. Take a month. Go spend 4 weeks in Lisbon or Chiang Mai or Medellin. Rent an apartment on Airbnb. Cook your meals, walk the neighborhoods, Use public transportation. Join a gym. Go to coffee shops. Live like a resident, not a tourist. Track your spending carefully. At the end of the month, you'll have data instead of assumptions. You'll know what it actually costs to live there. You'll know whether you could be happy there. You'll know whether the trade-offs are acceptable. For probably $2,000 total, you can test whether geographic arbitrage retirement is viable for you personally. That's the cheapest and most valuable financial planning you can do. Because if the answer is yes, you just shortened your working timeline by 10 or 20 years. If the answer is no, you learned something valuable about yourself and can adjust your plans accordingly. Most people never do this experiment. They assume they know the answer without testing it. Then they spend 30 years working toward a retirement target based on assumptions they never validated. That's insane. Go test the assumption. Spend a month in Portugal. If you hate it, you lost a month and $2,000. If you love it, you potentially gain decades of freedom. The asymmetry of that bet is enormous. Now, let's talk about what life actually looks like in geographic arbitrage retirement, because the details matter. You wake up without an alarm. The first hour of your day is yours. Coffee, reading, writing, exercise, whatever matters to you. No commute, no meetings, no emails you have to respond to. You decide what to do with the day based on interest and energy rather than obligation. Maybe you work on a small project that generates modest income. Maybe you learn a language. Maybe you write or paint or build something. Maybe you exercise and read and cook an elaborate meal. Maybe you meet friends for coffee and spend 3 hours talking. Maybe you walk around your city with no destination or purpose. The structure is whatever you create. Some people find this terrifying. Without external structure and obligation, they don't know what to do with themselves. These people are not good candidates for early retirement. They need employment to organize their time and provide purpose. Other people find unlimited time to be the greatest luxury imaginable. They have more interests than time to pursue them. They've spent decades frustrated by having to sell 40 to 60 hours per week to employment. These people thrive in geographic arbitrage retirement. You need to know which type you are before you pursue this path. The way to know is to pay attention to your weekends and vacations. If you're bored and aimless without work structure, you need work or you need to develop capacity for self-direction before retiring. If you're energized and engaged when you have free time and frustrated when you have to return to work, you'll thrive in retirement. This isn't about age or money. It's about psychology. The second thing that happens in geographic arbitrage retirement is that your relationship with money changes completely. When you're working, money is primarily about earning. How much you make, whether you got a raise, how your income compares to peers. Every financial decision is filtered through income. When you're in geographic arbitrage retirement, living on passive income from invested capital, money becomes entirely about spending and preservation. You're not trying to maximize income. You're trying to optimize spending to maximize quality of life within your fixed budget. This creates completely different psychology. You become hyper-aware of the value of purchases. A $100 dinner isn't just $100. It's 1/10 of your monthly food budget. Is this particular meal worth that trade-off? Sometimes yes, often no. This doesn't make you cheap. It makes you intentional. You spend freely on things that genuinely improve your life and cut ruthlessly on things that don't. Over time, you develop precise knowledge of what actually makes you happy versus what you spend money on out of habit or social pressure. Most people never develop this knowledge because they're always in earning mode, always able to spend more by working more. When income is capped and fixed, you're forced to optimize spending. This turns out to be one of the great benefits of Geographic arbitrage retirement. Not just the financial sustainability, but the clarity about values that comes from having to make real trade-offs. The third thing that happens is your time horizon extends. When you're working and looking at 3 or 4 decades before traditional retirement, your planning horizon is short. What happens this year, this quarter, this month? When you leave employment at 40 with enough capital to sustain indefinitely, you're suddenly thinking in 40 or 50-year time horizons. What do you want your life to look like at 60, 70, 80? What matters over decades rather than years? This long time horizon changes everything. Relationships matter more. Health matters more. Learning matters more. Status and consumption matter less. You realize that the next 40 years will be shaped by the habits and relationships and skills you develop now. Most people never think this way because they're trapped in short-term employment cycles, annual reviews, quarterly targets, monthly bills. Geographic arbitrage retirement forces long-term thinking because you're living a long-term strategy. This is psychologically uncomfortable at first and eventually becomes the greatest gift of the lifestyle. Let's be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying everyone should pursue geographic arbitrage retirement. I'm not saying $300,000 is enough for everyone in every circumstance. I'm not saying living abroad is superior to living in America. What I'm saying is that for a specific type of person, someone with flexibility around location, moderate spending needs, capacity for self-direction, and willingness to embrace a different lifestyle, $300,000 is genuinely enough to make employment optional indefinitely. This describes perhaps 20 to 30% of the population, not everyone, but a meaningful minority. If you're in that minority, the standard retirement advice telling you that you need $2 or $3 million is catastrophically
wrong.
It will keep you working for decades longer than necessary because it's based on assumptions that don't apply to you. The retirement planning industry uses the most expensive scenario as the baseline and calls everyone else's situation a special case. I'm telling you the opposite. Geographic arbitrage retirement should be the baseline calculation, and expensive domestic retirement should be the special case requiring justification. If you choose to stay in America and work until you have $2 million, great, but make it a choice based on genuine preference rather than assumption based on conventional wisdom. Calculate what freedom would actually cost for you personally, given your willingness to be flexible on location. Then decide whether additional years of employment are worth the additional comfort of staying domestic. For some people they are. For others they're not. But most people never run the calculation. They just assume they need $2 million because that's what the calculators say. Here's the final piece. $300,000 at a 4% withdrawal generates $12,000 annually. That's baseline minimum assuming zero additional income. But almost no one in geographic arbitrage retirement generates zero additional income. The internet has made location-independent income trivially easy for anyone with marketable skills. Teaching English online pays $15 to $25 per hour. Freelance writing pays $50 to $100 per hour if you're decent. Consulting in whatever you did professionally pays $100 to $300 per hour. Creating online courses generates passive income. Building small software products generates passive income. None of this requires traditional employment. All of it can be done on your schedule from anywhere with internet. If you generate an additional $3,000 to $6,000 annually from occasional freelance work, your total annu. Let's talk about what this actually looks like, not in theory, but in the day-to-day reality of someone who's made the leap, because the numbers are only half the story. The other half is what life feels like when you're no longer trading your time for money. When you've stepped off the treadmill and into a world where your days are your own, imagine waking up in a sunlit apartment in Lisbon. The air is cool, the city is quiet. You make coffee, not because you need to rush out the door, but because you have time to enjoy it. You read, you write, you walk to the market for fresh bread and fruit. You spend an hour learning Portuguese, not because you have to, but because you want to. You meet friends for lunch, wander the city's hills, maybe take a train to the beach. In the afternoon, you work on a small project, maybe a blog, maybe some freelance consulting, maybe teaching English online for a few hours. Not because you need the money, but because you enjoy the challenge and the connection. Dinner is at home or at a neighborhood restaurant where the owner knows your name. The evening is yours. Music, books, conversation, a walk along the river. There's no Sunday night dread, no alarm clock anxiety, no meetings to prepare for. Your time is your own. This isn't a fantasy. This is the daily reality for thousands of people who've chosen geographic arbitrage and financial independence. They're not all in Lisbon. Some are in Chiang Mai, where the cost of living is even lower and the expat community is vibrant. Some are in Medellin, where the weather is perfect year-round and the mountains are always in view. Some are in small towns in Mexico or seaside villages in Greece or the highlands of Ecuador. The details change, but the core experience is the same: freedom, time, and the ability to shape your days around what matters to you. But let's be honest, this life isn't for everyone. It requires a willingness to embrace uncertainty, to adapt to new cultures, to let go of the familiar. It means being away from family, at least some of the time. It means learning to live with less stuff, less status, less external validation. It means finding meaning and purpose outside of work, which is harder than it sounds if you've spent your whole life measuring your worth by your job title or your paycheck. For some, these trade-offs are too much. For others, they're a small price to pay for decades of freedom. The key is to know yourself, to test your assumptions, to experiment before you commit. Spend a month living abroad. Track your spending. Notice how you feel. Are you energized by the newness, or do you miss home? Do you find it easy to make friends, or do you feel isolated? Do you enjoy the slower pace, or do you crave the structure of work? There's no right answer, only the answer that's right. For you, if you find that you thrive, the next step is to make a plan. Set your target, $300,000. Break it down into monthly savings goals. Automate your investments. Cut your spending on things that don't matter so you can spend more on the things that do. Learn about index funds, dividend stocks, and the basics of global investing. Build skills that can generate location-independent income, even if it's just a few $1,000s a year. Start building connections in the places you might want to live: online forums, expat groups, language exchanges. The more you prepare, the easier the transition will be. And remember, you don't have to do this all at once. You can start with a sabbatical, a mini retirement, a year abroad. You can try living in different places at different price points until you find what fits. You can always come back. The point is not to lock yourself into a single path, but to give yourself options. To make work optional, not mandatory. To reclaim your time, your energy, your life. Charlie Munger understood this better than almost anyone. He knew that the real measure of wealth is not how much you have, but how much you need. He knew that freedom comes from needing less, not from having more. He knew that the world is full of opportunities for those willing to look beyond the familiar, to question the assumptions that keep most people trapped. He knew that arithmetic, not aspiration, is the key to independence. So, if you're willing to question the script you've been handed, if you're willing to optimize for freedom instead of status, For time instead of things, for experience. Instead of accumulation, then $300,000 is enough. Not for everyone, not for every lifestyle, but for a meaningful minority who are willing to be flexible, intentional, and a little bit brave. The financial industry will keep telling you that you need millions. They'll keep selling you fear, complexity, and the illusion of security. But the truth is simpler and more empowering. You don't need to be rich to be free. You just need to know what you value, what you're willing to trade, and how to do the math. Start with the numbers. Test your assumptions. Try the experiment. If it works for you, you could be free in 5 or 10 years, not 30 or 40. If it doesn't, you'll know you made the right choice for the right reasons. Either way, you'll have taken control of your future. Instead of letting someone else define it for you, the world is bigger, cheaper, and more accessible than you think. The path to freedom is shorter, simpler, and more achievable than you've been told. The only question is whether you're willing to take the first step. So, what are you waiting for? The math is on your side. The opportunity is real. The only thing standing between you and freedom is the decision to pursue it. $300,000. A willingness to be flexible. A plan. And the courage to live life on your own terms.